The sun was just beginning to peek through the thick canopy of the jungle, casting long streaks of golden light onto the winding river below. The air was heavy and humid, filled with the sounds of unseen creatures chirping and rustling in the undergrowth. The explorer moved carefully, pushing aside hanging vines and stepping over exposed roots, feeling the soft, damp earth give slightly under each step. This was a part of the world few people had ever seen, where every shadow could hide a mystery and every sound could signal something extraordinary. He had been walking for hours, following the river that twisted and turned through the jungle like a silver snake. The map he carried was old and hand-drawn, showing only rough outlines of the area, leaving much to the imagination and intuition. He had come here seeking stories, relics, and secrets of the jungle, but he never imagined he would stumble upon something that defied all logic. As he rounded a bend in the river, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow formed by the trees. But as he focused, the shape became clearer. It was massive, impossible in scale. Emerging from the dense greenery, partially hidden by the thick vines and towering trees, was the hull of what looked like a cruise ship. His heart raced, and for a moment he froze, unable to process what he was seeing. How could a ship, so large and designed for open water, end up here in the middle of the jungle, miles away from any navigable waterway? He approached slowly, his curiosity pushing him forward despite the questions racing through his mind. The closer he got, the more details emerged. The paint on the hull was faded and peeling, covered in patches of moss and lichen. Some parts of the metal had rusted, but the structure seemed surprisingly intact considering how long it must have been here. The scale of it was breathtaking. It was not just a boat, it was a floating city now swallowed by the jungle. Carefully, he found a way to climb onto what had once been the deck. The wood beneath his feet creaked and groaned under his weight, sending small clouds of dust into the humid air. The deck was littered with debris, broken furniture, shattered glass, and remnants of what must have once been luxurious decorations. The contrast between the wild jungle and the opulence of the ship was staggering. It was as if nature had reached out to reclaim something that had once belonged entirely to humans. Stepping further inside, the explorer was struck by the eerie quiet. The usual sounds of the jungle seemed to pause as he entered the interior. Sunlight filtered through broken windows and holes in the roof, illuminating corridors that twisted and turned like a maze. Dust motes danced in the air, catching the light in a way that made the place feel both magical and haunting. He wandered through the halls, touching the surfaces, feeling the history and the textures. There were rooms that had clearly been cabins, with small beds, drawers, and personal belongings left behind. Some drawers were open, revealing old photographs, letters, and clothing frozen in time. It was as if the people who had lived here had vanished in an instant, leaving their lives suspended in the air. In the grand dining hall, the explorer was astonished. Long tables that could seat dozens were still in place, some covered with dusty tablecloths. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, many broken, some swaying slightly in the breeze that found its way through holes in the walls. The scale of the space, the elegance of its design, and the overwhelming silence made the heart beat faster, not with fear but with wonder. It was like stepping into a dream, a surreal place where reality and imagination merged. Everywhere he looked, there were clues about the people who had once been here. Faded menus hinted at extravagant meals, and photographs of smiling passengers were scattered across the floor, some still pinned to walls. There were books, journals, and personal effects that suggested a life of comfort and leisure, now overtaken by time and nature. He could almost hear the echoes of laughter and conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the distant music that must have filled the air long ago. The explorer felt a mixture of excitement and unease. The discovery was incredible, but it was also a reminder of how fragile human endeavors are in the face of nature. The jungle had slowly swallowed the ship, erasing roads, docks, and any evidence of the life that had once surrounded it. It was a powerful lesson in impermanence, showing how quickly the world could reclaim what humans build. As he moved deeper into the ship, he noticed signs of decay and struggle. Some areas were damaged, with walls torn or floors caved in. The sight sparked 1,000 questions. How did the ship end up here? How long had it been abandoned? What had happened to the people on board? The mind raced with possibilities, each more unbelievable than the last. It was as if the jungle had swallowed an entire story, leaving only fragments for him to piece together. Hours passed as he explored, taking careful notes and photographs documenting every detail. Every corner seemed to reveal another mystery: a stairwell leading to nowhere, a room filled with overturned furniture, a hallway with footprints frozen in dust. The experience was surreal, a combination of awe, curiosity, and a growing sense of responsibility to uncover the truth. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the ship, the explorer sat on the deck, looking out at the jungle that stretched endlessly in every direction. He felt a deep connection to this strange, impossible place. It was more than a discovery. It was a story waiting to be told, a secret that had remained hidden for decades, now revealed to the world. Yet there was a weight to it too, a sense that some stories are both wondrous and sorrowful, carrying the echoes of lives once lived and dreams that had vanished into the wilderness. As night approached, he prepared to camp nearby, reluctant to leave but knowing the jungle could be dangerous after dark. The ship loomed behind him, a giant ghostly silhouette against the fading light, holding its secrets tightly within its walls. He lay awake that night, listening to the jungle sounds, imagining the history of the place and feeling a mixture of fear, excitement, and reverence. The discovery had changed him, offering a glimpse into a world where human ambition meets the unstoppable force of nature, leaving behind a mystery that would haunt and inspire him for the rest of his life. Morning arrived with a soft golden light that filtered through the dense canopy of the jungle. The explorer stirred from a restless sleep, lying on a makeshift bed of leaves and cloth near the edge of the river. His mind kept returning to the ship. He could not shake the image of its towering structure, the way it seemed impossibly out of place in the thick, tangled wilderness. Curiosity, stronger than fatigue or fear, drove him back to the ship. He approached cautiously, noting how the jungle seemed to close in around the massive vessel. Every step felt like a careful negotiation with the natural world, as though the vines, roots, and trees themselves were watching, waiting to see what he would do. The air smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the sounds of the jungle grew louder in the stillness of early morning. Birds called out from the canopy, insects hummed, and somewhere in the distance the roar of a waterfall punctuated the background. Stepping onto the deck, he ran his hands over the weathered railings, feeling the rough texture of rusted metal beneath his fingers. It was strange to think of this place as a home for so many people long ago, a floating palace of luxury now silent and abandoned. The thought of all those lives, once full of laughter and routine, now vanished, made a shiver run down his spine. He wondered what had happened here and why the world seemed to have forgotten this enormous vessel, tucked away in the jungle. He entered the main hall again, the floorboards groaning under his weight. Dust hung in the air, thick and heavy, yet golden in the morning sunlight streaming through broken windows. The walls were lined with faded paintings and photographs, their colors muted by time. Some were portraits of smiling faces, dressed elegantly, while others depicted moments of leisure and adventure. Each image told a story, but the stories were incomplete, leaving him to imagine what had transpired here decades ago. In the dining hall, the tables were set in a ghostly mimicry of their former use. Plates, cutlery, and glasses were scattered haphazardly, as though the last meal had been interrupted in haste. The chandeliers overhead, though damaged and covered in dust, still held an air of grandeur. The explorer ran his fingers along the tabletop, tracing the carved patterns and designs, marveling at the craftsmanship that had gone into creating something so elaborate, now left to the mercy of nature. Moving deeper into the ship, he discovered what had once been the lounges and sitting areas. Velvet sofas were torn and decayed, but the structure beneath remained strong. Old newspapers, magazines, and books littered the floors, offering glimpses into a time and world that had vanished. He picked up a small journal, its pages yellowed and brittle, and read a few lines written in careful handwriting. The entries spoke of daily life, of trips planned and enjoyed, of laughter and occasional disagreements among friends or family. These mundane details felt surreal against the backdrop of a ship swallowed by the jungle. Each room he entered brought a mix of fascination and unease. Some cabins were still neatly arranged, while others were chaos, with drawers pulled open and belongings strewn across the floor. Shoes, clothing, and hats lay scattered as though the occupants had left in a hurry or had simply vanished. The explorer could not help but feel a growing weight of responsibility. He was not merely a visitor. He was a witness to a story frozen in time, a custodian of memories abandoned in the wilderness. He paused in a long corridor, listening. The silence was thick and heavy, filled only by the occasional creak of the ship settling and the distant calls of jungle wildlife. The air was humid and smelled faintly of mold and decay. As he walked, he noticed strange markings on the walls and floors, scratches and dents that suggested movement, struggle, or hurried passage. Questions formed in his mind, some with answers that could never be known. Why had the ship been left here? How had it ended up so far from civilization? And most hauntingly, what had happened to the people who once lived on it? The explorer found a spiral staircase leading to the upper decks. The steps were narrow and worn, and he gripped the railing tightly, careful with every move. Reaching the top, he emerged onto a balcony overlooking the river and jungle beyond. From this vantage point, the scale of the ship was overwhelming. It was massive, its decks stretching far into the distance, dwarfed only by the surrounding trees. The sight was beautiful and terrifying at once, a monument to human ambition and the relentless power of nature. He continued to explore, moving from the upper decks to hidden areas rarely seen by the public. Storage rooms held crates and barrels, many rotted or broken open. Some containers had labels that hinted at their contents: food supplies, cleaning products, even bottles of wine, but all were spoiled by time. The explorer imagined the crew sorting supplies, preparing for voyages that had long since ended, their routines now frozen in the ship's decaying walls. In a small, dimly lit room, he discovered a collection of maps and charts. They were old, brittle, and faded, showing routes and destinations that suggested ambitious plans and far-reaching journeys. The explorer traced his fingers over the lines, marveling at the precision and care that had gone into planning each voyage. It was a reminder that this ship had once been alive with purpose and activity, a center of life and human endeavor. Now it was a silent witness to the passage of time. As he moved through the ship, he began to notice small signs of the jungle reclaiming its territory. Vines snaked through broken windows and roots had begun to penetrate the wooden floors. Birds had made nests in corners and crevices, and insects crawled along the walls and furniture. The juxtaposition of human luxury and natural encroachment was striking. It was as though the jungle itself was rewriting the story, asserting its dominance over a world built by human hands. Hours passed without the explorer noticing. He was absorbed in the details and the silent testimonies of a forgotten past. He photographed the rooms, made sketches, and carefully documented everything he found. Each discovery added to the growing tapestry of the ship's story, revealing glimpses of a life that had once been vibrant and full. The more he uncovered, the more he realized that this was not just a relic, it was a doorway into history, a chance to understand a world that had disappeared beneath layers of time and foliage. As the afternoon sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the decks, the explorer found himself in what had once been the ship's main lounge. The room was large and open, with tall windows that had long since lost their glass. Dust-covered furniture was arranged in a way that suggested gatherings, conversations, and music. He could almost hear the faint echoes of piano notes, laughter, and the shuffle of feet across the polished floors. The feeling was both enchanting and sorrowful, a reminder that even the grandest human creations are temporary. He paused to sit in one of the larger chairs, letting the quiet wash over him. Thoughts of the ship's past filled his mind, the lives lived, the journeys undertaken, and the mystery of how it came to rest here in the jungle. There was a sense of intimacy in the discovery, as if he were peeking into private moments long forgotten by the world. It was a privilege, but also a heavy responsibility, to witness this intersection of history and nature. Night approached again, and the explorer reluctantly decided to leave the ship for the day. He retraced his steps across the deck, the shadows growing longer and the jungle sounds more pronounced. As he made his way back to his camp, he couldn't help but glance over his shoulder at the massive structure. The ship loomed in the darkness, a silent giant filled with stories and secrets waiting to be uncovered. He knew that he would return, compelled by a curiosity that would not be satisfied until he understood the full story of this impossible vessel. The morning air was thick and damp as the explorer returned to the massive ship, his mind buzzing with questions and theories. He had seen so much in the past 2 days, but there was still an overwhelming sense of mystery hanging over the place. As he stepped onto the deck, he felt the weight of the jungle pressing in from all sides, the trees towering above him like silent guardians. The ship seemed to loom even larger in the morning light, its hull partially hidden by creeping vines and branches. He entered through a side door, one he had not explored before. The hallway was dark and narrow, with dust settling in thick layers on the floor. The faint smell of decay mixed with the earthy aroma of the jungle outside. As he walked, he noticed marks on the walls that suggested hasty movements. Scratches and small dents hinted that there had been struggle or urgency, and the thought made him shiver. It was one thing to see abandoned luxury, but quite another to imagine the human stories behind it. Exploring room after room, he found signs of the ship's former inhabitants. Small personal items were scattered across floors and shelves: glasses, watches, jewelry, and letters. Some objects were surprisingly intact, their colors preserved despite the years of neglect. The explorer picked up a small notebook, its pages yellowed and fragile. Inside, there were sketches of the river, notes about the ship's journey, and entries describing daily life aboard the vessel. Reading them, he felt an intimate connection to people long gone, understanding their routines, worries, and joys. He moved toward the main cabin area, where the furniture was more elaborate. Sofas and chairs, once plush and vibrant, were now threadbare and coated in dust. A large wardrobe stood at the end of the room, its door slightly ajar, revealing neatly folded clothes that had long since lost their color. Each item seemed to tell a story. A pair of shoes scuffed from walking the deck, a scarf carefully hung over a chair, a hat resting on a table as if its owner might return at any moment. As he ventured further, he came across a corridor leading to the lower decks. The air grew cooler and damper, carrying a faint musty smell. He noticed broken floorboards and small holes in the walls, through which vines and roots had begun to penetrate. Nature was slowly reclaiming the ship, entwining with human creation in a delicate, almost eerie balance. The contrast between luxury and decay was striking, and it made the explorer think deeply about the impermanence of human life and ambition. In one room, he found a cluster of personal belongings that hinted at sudden departure. Drawers were left open, books scattered, and clothing piled on the floor. A small pair of shoes sat side by side near the doorway, and a child's toy lay forgotten in a corner. The scene felt haunting, a snapshot of ordinary life frozen abruptly in time. The explorer could not help but feel a pang of sadness, imagining families living here, unaware that this serene world would eventually become a monument to mystery. He continued exploring, entering what had once been the ship's entertainment area. The remnants of a piano stood in one corner, its keys yellowed and some broken. Sheet music lay scattered across the floor, and he could almost hear the faint echo of melodies that once filled the halls. Old instruments, now cracked and dusty, seemed to whisper stories of evenings filled with music, laughter, and dance. The juxtaposition of human joy and present desolation was almost too much to take in, yet it made the explorer even more determined to understand the full story of this forgotten vessel. Moving toward the back of the ship, he discovered a series of rooms that had clearly been crew quarters. The beds were small, simple, and utilitarian, in stark contrast to the grand luxury of the upper decks. Personal effects were minimal but telling. Small photographs pinned to walls, a toothbrush still resting in a cup, a few folded clothes. These spaces spoke of hard work, routine, and the dedication of those who kept the ship running. The explorer felt a profound respect for the unseen lives that had maintained this floating palace, often invisible to the passengers enjoying their leisure. In the storage rooms, he found barrels and crates that had long since rotted open. Inside were remnants of supplies, tins, dried goods, bottles, and cleaning materials. Some crates had labels with dates and destinations, offering clues about the ship's last known routes. The explorer examined the details carefully, piecing together a timeline of events. Every object seemed to contribute to a larger puzzle. revealing a glimpse into the life and times of the people who had sailed here so long ago. He noticed one particular hallway that led to a series of small, dark rooms. Each room contained personal belongings that were strangely preserved. Jewelry boxes, letters, and photographs were scattered across the floors and surfaces. The explorer felt a sense of intimacy in these discoveries, as if he were peering into private moments of life, love, and loss. He carefully photographed each item, knowing that these fragments of the past held stories that could never be fully told. In a larger room at the end of the corridor, he found something that made his heart skip a beat. The space seemed to have been left exactly as it was during the last moments of occupancy. Tables were overturned, chairs knocked over, and personal belongings scattered. The chaos suggested a sudden departure, an event that had forced people to abandon their lives abruptly. The explorer stood still, imagining the fear, confusion, and urgency that must have filled the air decades ago. He moved carefully through the ship, noticing how the jungle had begun to infiltrate every corner. Roots pushed through floors, vines crept along walls, and small plants sprouted in the damp, dark spaces. Birds nested in crevices, and insects crawled over surfaces, reclaiming what humans had built. The explorer realized that this place was no longer simply a ship. It was a collaboration between human ingenuity and nature's relentless power. The jungle was slowly erasing the traces of human life, creating a new story intertwined with the past. Hours passed, and he explored deeper into areas that were difficult to access. Narrow stairways led to hidden compartments, and small doors revealed rooms that seemed untouched for decades. In one compartment, he found a collection of journals and letters, carefully preserved by the dry conditions. The entries described ordinary life aboard the ship, the routines, challenges, and hopes of passengers and crew. Some entries hinted at worry or fear, subtle notes that suggested awareness of changing circumstances. The explorer read carefully, feeling a growing connection to these people who had lived and worked in this isolated floating world. In the ship's control room, he found instruments and dials long frozen in time. Maps and charts were pinned to walls marked with destinations, routes, and notes in fading ink. He imagined the crew navigating the vast rivers and waterways, relying on skill, experience, and intuition. The room was quiet, yet it spoke volumes about the effort and dedication required to manage such a vessel. The explorer traced his fingers over the instruments, marveling at the human ingenuity that had once kept this ship moving safely. As the day drew to a close, he moved back toward the deck, pausing to look out over the surrounding jungle. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow over the trees and river. The ship seemed to hold its breath, a silent witness to decades of mystery. The explorer felt a mix of awe and reverence. He had uncovered pieces of a story that had been lost to time, and yet much remained unknown. The weight of the unanswered questions pressed upon him, making the discovery both thrilling and humbling. He sat on the deck, listening to the sounds of the jungle, reflecting on the lives that had once animated this place. He imagined the laughter of children, the conversations of friends, the music and clinking glasses, all now silenced. The contrast between the vibrant past and the quiet present was almost tangible. He realized that this discovery was more than a historical artifact. It was a portal into human experience, a reminder of ambition, joy, fear, and resilience. As darkness settled over the jungle, he reluctantly prepared to leave for the night. The ship loomed behind him, massive and mysterious, holding secrets that he was only beginning to understand. He knew that he would return, compelled by a desire to uncover the rest of the story hidden within its walls. The experience had changed him, offering a glimpse into a forgotten world where human life intersected with the unstoppable force of nature, leaving behind a legacy that was both beautiful and haunting. The sun rose slowly, piercing through the dense jungle canopy and scattering light across the massive ship. The explorer awoke with a sense of anticipation. Every visit brought new surprises, and today, he hoped to uncover more of the ship's hidden stories. He packed his tools carefully, camera, notebooks, and a small flashlight for the darker areas, and set off toward the vessel. The jungle was alive with morning sounds, the chatter of birds, the rustle of leaves, and the distant calls of unseen animals. The ship waited, silent yet imposing, a relic suspended between history and mystery. He approached the main entrance and paused, taking in the sheer scale of the structure. The vines had grown thicker overnight, almost as if the jungle itself wanted to guard the secrets inside. Every inch of the ship told a story, from the rusted hull to the decayed wood of the decks. The explorer felt a mixture of awe and curiosity, knowing that today could reveal some of the most remarkable insights yet. Inside, he moved carefully through the corridors, documenting each detail with meticulous care. The walls, covered in faded paint and peeling wallpaper, hinted at the grandeur that had once been. Small scratches, dents, and marks suggested human activity long forgotten. Every room offered something unique: cabins with personal belongings, lounges with torn furniture, and hallways that twisted like a labyrinth. The explorer marveled at how much of the ship's interior remained intact, despite years of exposure to the elements. In the crew quarters, he discovered journals and letters that had somehow survived the test of time. Each entry gave a glimpse into the lives of the people who had lived and worked aboard the ship. There were notes about daily routines, conversations, and small events that might have seemed trivial at the time but now felt significant. The explorer read slowly, absorbing the details. These documents added depth to the story he was piecing together, revealing the human side of a vessel that had become almost mythical in its isolation. He moved to the lower decks where the air was cooler and damp. The smell of earth and decay was stronger here, and the floor creaked under his weight. In one storage area, he found crates and barrels that had been untouched for decades. Labels on some containers revealed provisions and supplies, giving clues about the ship's last voyages. He imagined the crew meticulously organizing these supplies, unaware that they would one day become artifacts for an explorer to discover. The contrast between careful human planning and the chaotic reclamation by nature was stark and fascinating. Further along, he found a series of cabins that told a different story. Unlike the grand upper decks, these rooms were modest and functional, with simple beds and basic furnishings. Yet personal touches were evident: photographs on walls, handwritten notes, small mementos. The explorer felt a deep respect for the lives of those who had worked quietly behind the scenes, keeping the ship operational. Their stories were often overshadowed by the grandeur above. But here, in the stillness of their abandoned quarters, they spoke loudly through the remnants they left behind. The explorer's attention turned to a large hall that appeared to have been used for gatherings or entertainment. Chandeliers hung precariously, some broken, their crystals reflecting the sunlight that streamed in through holes in the roof. Dust-covered furniture was arranged as though waiting for an audience that would never return. Sheet music lay scattered across the floor, and a broken piano stood silently in one corner. He imagined the music that once filled the space, the laughter and conversation, the moments of joy that had made this ship a vibrant community on the water. As he explored further, he discovered small rooms tucked away behind panels and doors that had long since been forgotten. Inside, he found objects that hinted at the last moments aboard the ship. Personal items were scattered, some carefully placed, others tossed aside in haste. Clothing, hats, shoes, and small toys created a haunting tableau, a reminder that life had once thrived here and then abruptly vanished. The explorer paused, imagining the fear, confusion, and urgency that must have gripped the occupants in their final hours. The jungle's presence was unmistakable. Vines snaked through broken windows, roots pushed through floorboards, and small plants sprouted in the damp corners. Birds and insects had made the ship their home, adding another layer to the story. The explorer realized that the ship was no longer solely a human creation. It was a part of the jungle, a living entity shaped by both human history and natural forces. Every step he took was a negotiation between the past and present, a careful balance between discovery and respect for the environment. In the control room, instruments and dials were frozen in time. Maps and charts were pinned to the walls, marked with routes, destinations, and annotations. The explorer studied them carefully, trying to understand the intentions of those who had once navigated the ship. He traced the lines with his fingers, imagining the hands that had once plotted courses and made critical decisions. This room, silent and still, spoke volumes about the dedication and skill required to operate such a vessel. It was a testament to human ingenuity, now quietly fading into the embrace of the jungle. Hours passed as he explored hidden compartments and difficult-to-reach areas. Narrow staircases led to storage rooms, secret passageways, and small cabins that had remained untouched. Each discovery added a new piece to the puzzle, revealing lives, routines, and moments that had been lost to time. The explorer felt a growing connection to the people who had once called this ship home. Though decades had passed, their presence lingered in the objects, the rooms, and the stories waiting to be uncovered. In one of the upper lounges, he found a small collection of journals and letters neatly stacked in a corner. The entries revealed personal thoughts, fears, and hopes, providing an intimate glimpse into the emotional lives of the ship's occupants. Some writings hinted at tension or unease, while others were filled with joy and excitement. The explorer carefully read and documented each piece, knowing that these fragile fragments were invaluable to understanding the human side of this extraordinary discovery. As the afternoon sun began to fade, the explorer moved to the ship's outer deck, taking a moment to survey the surrounding jungle. The trees stretched endlessly in every direction, a sea of green that seemed to swallow the ship whole. The river below reflected the fading light, adding a sense of serenity to the otherwise eerie scene. He felt a mixture of awe and humility, realizing that this place was more than a relic. It was a living testament to human ambition, resilience, and the unstoppable force of nature. He spent time on the deck, sketching the ship's structure and noting areas that required further investigation. Every detail mattered, from the smallest scratches on a wall to the way vines had entwined themselves around the railing. The ship was a puzzle, a story waiting to be fully understood, and he was determined to uncover it piece by piece. The interplay between decay and preservation fascinated him, as each day brought new insights and discoveries. As night approached, the jungle came alive with sounds. Insects buzzed, birds called, and distant animals stirred. The explorer made his way back to camp, taking one last look at the ship. Its massive silhouette stood against the darkening sky, a silent giant holding secrets that had eluded the world for decades. He felt both exhilarated and contemplative, aware that the ship's story was far from complete. There were still mysteries to solve, clues to uncover, and connections to piece together. Settling down for the night, he reflected on the day's discoveries. The ship had revealed so much, yet it had also deepened the sense of wonder and curiosity. Every room, object, and mark offered a glimpse into a forgotten world, a reminder of the lives and stories that had once thrived here. The explorer felt a profound respect for the past and a growing determination to continue the investigation. This journey was not just about uncovering a lost ship. It was about understanding the human experiences embedded within it and the ways nature had claimed it over time. As he drifted to sleep, he imagined the ship as it once was, alive with people, laughter, and music. The thought was comforting and haunting at the same time, a reminder that even in silence and decay, the echoes of life could still be felt. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring more discoveries, more questions, and another chance to unravel the mysteries of this incredible vessel hidden deep in the jungle. The morning light barely pierced the thick canopy of the jungle as the explorer prepared to return to the massive ship. Each visit had brought new discoveries, but today he felt a sense of anticipation unlike before. He packed his tools carefully, knowing that this final exploration might reveal answers to questions that had lingered in his mind for days. The jungle was alive with sound, the chorus of birds, insects, and distant animals greeting the dawn as he made his way toward the ship. The air was heavy with moisture, carrying the scent of earth and vegetation, making each breath feel dense and alive. Stepping onto the deck, he felt the enormity of the vessel around him. The jungle seemed to press in on all sides, yet the ship stood resilient, its rusted hull and weathered decks holding a silent dignity. As he moved forward, he noticed details he had missed on previous visits, the intricate carvings on railings, the delicate patterns on broken windows, and small personal items tucked in corners. Each discovery added another layer to the story, bringing him closer to understanding the lives that had once filled this extraordinary floating world. He began his exploration with the main hall, where light streamed through broken windows, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air. The grandeur of the space was overwhelming. Chandeliers hung precariously from the ceiling, their crystals catching the sunlight, and long tables stood in silent testimony to gatherings that had taken place long ago. The explorer ran his hands over the surfaces, feeling the texture of wood and metal, imagining the laughter, conversation, and music that had once filled the room. Every detail was a clue, every object a piece of the puzzle that had remained unsolved for decades. Moving deeper into the ship, he entered cabins that had been untouched by previous exploration. Small personal items were scattered across the floors and surfaces. Clothing, shoes, and accessories hinted at the lives of passengers who had once enjoyed comfort and leisure. Some items were carefully arranged, suggesting a sudden departure, while others were tossed aside, creating a sense of urgency and unease. The explorer could almost hear the voices of those who had lived here, their stories lingering in the air, waiting to be understood. In the crew quarters, he found journals and letters that offered intimate glimpses into the daily routines and emotions of the people who had maintained the ship. Some entries spoke of mundane tasks, while others hinted at worry, tension, or hope. Reading them, the explorer felt a deep connection to these unseen lives. He realized that the ship's story was not just about grandeur and luxury. It was also about ordinary people, their struggles and their resilience. Every note, every entry added depth to the narrative, painting a picture of a community living within the isolated walls of the vessel. Exploring the storage rooms, he discovered crates and barrels that had been left undisturbed for decades. Labels and markings offered clues about the ship's routes, destinations, and supplies. The explorer imagined the crew carefully organizing these provisions, unaware that their efforts would one day serve as historical artifacts. The contrast between the careful human planning and the chaotic reclamation by nature was striking. Vines snaked through cracks, roots pushed up through the floors, and small plants sprouted in the damp corners, weaving a story of nature's persistence and the passage of time. In one hidden compartment, he found a collection of personal effects that told a story of sudden abandonment. Shoes were lined neatly by the door, small toys were scattered across the floor, and clothing was left in disarray. The scene felt haunting, a frozen moment in time that spoke of lives interrupted. The explorer paused, imagining the fear, confusion, and urgency that must have gripped the occupants. Each object was a testament to their existence, a reminder that even in disappearance, human presence leaves traces. He continued to explore the upper decks, where the air was lighter, and the view of the surrounding jungle was breathtaking. From this vantage point, he could see how the ship had become part of the landscape, almost swallowed by the trees and vines that had grown unchecked for decades. The river below meandered through the dense foliage, reflecting the light of the rising sun. The explorer felt a profound sense of humility, realizing that human ambition, no matter how grand, is always subject to the forces of nature. The ship was a monument to both human creativity and nature's relentless reclamation. The explorer moved to the ship's entertainment area, where remnants of music, dance, and celebration still lingered in the air. A piano stood silently in one corner, its keys yellowed and some broken. Sheet music was scattered across the floor, and the furniture was coated in dust. He imagined the evenings when passengers gathered here, laughing, dancing, and sharing stories. The contrast between that lively past and the present silence was almost painful. It was a reminder of the fleeting nature of human joy, and yet also a testament to the enduring impact of memory and history. In the control room, he found instruments, dials, and maps that had long been frozen in time. The charts revealed routes, destinations, and annotations, providing insights into the ship's operations. The explorer traced the lines with his fingers, imagining the hands that had once plotted courses and made decisions critical to the ship's journey. The room, quiet and still, spoke volumes about human skill, coordination, and ambition. It was a place where countless choices had been made, shaping the lives of everyone aboard. And now it stood as a silent witness to history. As the afternoon wore on, the explorer explored hidden nooks and secret passageways, each revealing small treasures of the past. Personal belongings, notes, photographs, and small artifacts offered glimpses into the daily lives, emotions, and experiences of the people who had called this ship home. Each discovery was a reminder that history is not just about grand events, but also about ordinary lives and personal moments. The explorer felt a profound sense of responsibility to honor these stories and preserve them for the world to see. He paused on the deck as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the ship and jungle. The colors of the sky reflected in the river below, adding a sense of serenity to the otherwise haunting scene. The explorer sat quietly, absorbing the magnitude of what he had discovered. The ship was more than a relic. It was a living story, a bridge between past and present, human ambition and nature's power. Every detail, every object, every mark contributed to a narrative that was both compelling and humbling. Night fell slowly over the jungle, and the explorer reluctantly prepared to leave the ship for the final time. The massive structure loomed behind him, a silent giant holding secrets and stories that had survived decades of isolation. He knew that the ship would continue to captivate and inspire, a reminder of the complexity of human life and the unstoppable force of the natural world. As he walked back to his camp, the sounds of the jungle enveloped him, the chorus of life reminding him that discovery is a journey, not a destination. Settling down for the night, the explorer reflected on the entire experience. The ship had revealed more than he could have imagined. Glimpses of joy, struggle, resilience, and mystery. It had shown him the fragility of human endeavors and the persistence of nature. More than that, it had given him a connection to the lives of people long gone, a sense that their stories mattered and deserved to be remembered. He drifted to sleep with the image of the ship in his mind, knowing that its secrets, though partially uncovered, would continue to resonate, inspiring awe, curiosity, and respect for generations to come.